Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. The other day something occurred to me. We've been doing lots and lots of review videos on all the latest equipment, and I always get together things and do a quick brief test and then give you guys a more in-depth look at the equipment, and you guys provide me lots of comments and I provide some feedback, and then later on that leads to comparison videos, and we know the drill. And it works out pretty well. But one thing that I feel is missing, well, actually two things, and I mentioned this the other day. The first thing is missing is more timely reviews. I want to update my videos a lot sooner. And the other thing I noticed is missing is the fact that we don't have as much long-term testing. So as I mentioned to you the other day, I will be doing an update video on the Sigma 35mm 1.4 since I've been using that lens for quite some time. So that is still coming. But also it occurred to me that I have lots of equipment that, I use all the time, and I have a very, very good impression of it already. And today we're going to be looking at such a piece of equipment. Today we're going to be looking at Sony's 35mm f1.8 E-mount lens. Now, we will get on to other lenses that I've owned for, over a year, or in some cases many years. But this lens is a lens that I've only owned for a couple of months now, but I've been very, very impressed with it. I like this lens because on my 5N, it does equal a normal focal length. So it's, equivalent to a 50mm field of view on a full frame camera. This lens is very great for walk-around use. It's actually sharper, in my opinion, than the Nikon 35mm 1.8 that I've used on Nikon crop sensor bodies in the past. And it also has optical image stabilization, which is something that you don't typically find on very many fast primes in the Nikon and Canon world. This lens, let's see here, some specs here. This lens features 8 elements in 6 groups, and it is a 7-bladed diaphragm. Now, a lot of people start talking about having more aperture blades and talking about how that affects bokeh. Of course, in lens design, I'm no optical engineer, or whatever they call themselves. But anyways, I'm not an engineer, but I can tell you that I do find the bokeh on this lens to be pretty good for what it is. This lens retails for a price of $450 USD, which I do honestly think is kind of on the steep side. Even with the stabilization, I still think it's a bit much. But at any rate, it's not terribly expensive for what it is. And it does a very, very good job. Of course, I will post some links to some sample photos in the description below as always. But for the time being, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the lens itself. Taking a closer look at this lens, it reminds me of another 35mm lens we've looked at recently, being the Sigma 35mm 1.4. This is a much smaller lens designed for APS-C sensors, and of course it's a mirrorless lens, so it's going to be much, much smaller than the Sigma. But the finish does nonetheless remind me of the Sigma a lot. So it is a bit of a fingerprint magnet, but that's okay. It does look nice. This lens, being an E-mount lens, doesn't really have any buttons or switches for autofocus or stabilization. That's entirely controlled from the camera body, so it gives it a very, very clean look. With this lens being designed for APS-C, it can be made to be extremely small and compact. It's much smaller than something like, say, the Nikon 35mm 1.8, which is also a crop sensor lens. And I feel like this lens is a little bit sharper too. I know that those two lenses are not really in the same category, but that's the only other crop sensor 35 I've kind of shot with that I can compare it to. The nice thing about the Sony E-mount lenses is that even though some of them are more kind of on the kit lens side of the spectrum, I feel like all these lenses are very well put together, and this one is no exception. It is, of course, a metal mount, and it is very lightweight and small and compact, but it does have a very solid put together feel to it. And I definitely wish that Nikon and Canon would make more DSLR lenses that were very fast like this one that have stabilization built in. So that's something that's very awesome. Even shooting this lens on my older 5N, which doesn't have the world's best high ISO performance compared to what we have now, this lens still shines even on that body. So I look forward to testing this on something like the A6000 pretty soon. And who knows, I may even update my my 5N to an A6000. But I'm a bit fickle with these things sometimes. Okay, so we'll put this on the body so you guys can get a better look there. Of course, this lens does have a hood that it comes with as well. And even with that attached, it's still very, very tiny. Front filter size is 49 millimeters. I haven't bothered with a protective UV filter because the front element is very, very small and it's a bit recessed, so I'm not really worried about damage there. Of course, there are sample photos in the description, as always. As I mentioned before, I've been using this lens kind of just like a everyday walk-around type lens. And it works very, very well in situations where you're just getting candid shots, street photography. If you go on vacation and you go to a museum or something like that, you don't want to bother with the flash. It works out very well. Especially, I especially don't want to use flash because on my 5N, I would have to take off my electronic viewfinder and actually attach the flash up there. And I'd much rather use the viewfinder. So this lens is particularly useful for me on this body. Of course, we will be doing some more testing in the future, and I definitely cannot wait to get this on the A6000. So be on the lookout for that. As always, if you guys have any questions or comments, just write me in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.